The world is loud, the quest is long, but here, the fire is warm and the data is safe. Welcome back to Restoring Mana. And before you drift off, leave a memory in the comments. Tell us about the one save point you'll never forget. Now, let the world fade away. Today, we are going to engage in a granular examination of one of the most persistent and divisive mechanics in the history of the tactical role-playing genre. We are discussing entropy. We are discussing degradation. We are discussing the integer value known as weapon durability within the Fire Emblem franchise, developed by intelligent systems. To understand why a weapon breaks, one must first understand the philosophical underpinning of finite resource management in a grid-based simulation. A sword in Fire Emblem is not merely a tool of combat, it is a decreasing asset. It is a column of numbers in a spreadsheet that is slowly counting down to zero. Many players find this stressful. They hoard their strongest weapons, the silver lances, the killing edges, the legendary regalia, waiting for a final battle that often arrives with the player still possessing a convoy full of unused steel. This phenomenon is known as the elixir syndrome. But the game designers intended for this friction. They intended for the breaking point. Over the next several hours, we will chronologically analyze the implementation of weapon durability in every mainline entry of the series, noting the slight variations in durability caps, the repair mechanics, and the eventual controversial removal of the system in the modern era. Let us begin at the beginning. The year was 1990. The console was the Famicom. The game was Fire Emblem, Enkoku Ryu to Hikari no Tsurugi. In this foundational text, the durability system was established in its rawest form. Each weapon possessed a set number of uses. When a unit engaged in combat, a use was subtracted. When the value reached zero, the weapon broke. It vanished. There was no fanfare, no explosion of particles. The item simply ceased to exist in the unit's inventory, leaving an empty slot. In this first iteration, the Iron Sword, the most basic implement of the mercenary class, came with roughly 40 uses. This number, 40, is significant. It represents a generous amount of combat potential. If a unit were to attack once per turn, the Iron Sword would last for 40 turns. However, if the unit were fast enough to double the enemy, that is, to attack twice in a single round of combat based on the attack speed formula, the durability would deplete at twice the rate. Thus, a 40-use Iron Sword is effectively a 20-round weapon for a high-speed unit like the character Navarre. It is important to note the graphical limitations of the Famicom hardware. The durability of a weapon was not always immediately visible on the main map screen without navigating through submenus. This required the player to maintain a mental inventory of their supply lines. There was, however, a critical exception to the rule of degradation in this first entry, the falchion. The falchion is the personal weapon of the protagonist, Marth. In Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light, the falchion possessed infinite durability. It was an unbreakable constant in a world of decaying iron and steel. This design choice signaled to the player that the falchion was divine. It existed outside the laws of thermodynamics that governed the rest of the game's economy. While the iron lance would eventually rust and shatter, the falchion remained. This dichotomy, the finite versus the infinite, formed the core tension of the inventory management system. 2 years later, in 1992, Fire Emblem Gaiden was released. Gaiden, true to its name, served as a side story that deviated heavily from the established norms. In Gaiden, weapons did not exist as consumable items in the traditional sense. Instead, characters could equip a single item that modified their base statistics. These items did not break. A steel lance in Gaiden was a permanent fixture. This removed the anxiety of resource depletion, but it introduced a different kind of monotony, the monotony of stability. Without the fear of breakage, the player had no incentive to cycle through different weapons. They simply equipped the item with the highest numerical yield and proceeded to clear the map. This deviation would not last. The series would return to the concept of entropy. In 1996, the Super Famicom saw the release of Fire Emblem, Seizen no Keifu, or Genealogy of the Holy War. This title introduced massive maps, a generational system, and a fundamental reworking of how broken weapons were handled. In previous games, a broken weapon vanished. It was deleted from the game's code. In Genealogy, a broken weapon remained in the inventory. It became a broken sword or broken lance. Its weight increased drastically, usually to a value of 20 or higher, crippling the unit's avoid stat. Its might reduced to 0. It was, for all intents and purposes, a useless heavy object. However, it did not disappear. Genealogy introduced the blacksmith. Located in the base castle of each chapter, the blacksmith allowed the player to repair weapons for a fee. The cost was calculated per point of durability restored. This changed the economic loop entirely. The question was no longer when will this break, but rather can I afford to fix it? Gold in Genealogy was not shared in a communal pool. Each unit had their own personal wallet. If the Lord, Sigurd, wished to repair his silver sword, he needed to have acquired the gold himself, either by visiting villages or winning rounds in the arena. If he was poor, his sword remained dull. This system encouraged the extended use of specific weapons because Genealogy also tracked the number of kills achieved by a specific individual weapon. If a single iron sword achieved 50 kills, it gained the critical skill, granting a chance to deal double damage. Thus, the player was incentivized not to discard weapons, but to maintain them, to polish them, to use the same iron blade for years, repairing it, breaking it, and repairing it again. The weapon became a ship of Theseus. Is it the same sword if the blade has been hammered out 50 times? The game code says yes. We now move to the handheld era, the Game Boy Advance. The binding blade, the blazing blade, and the sacred stones. Here, the repair mechanics of Genealogy were abandoned. The developers returned to the harsh reality of the NES era. When a weapon breaks, it is gone. Let us examine the durability values of the standard GBA weapon hierarchy. This hierarchy is remarkably consistent across all three titles. The iron sword, 46 uses. The steel sword, 30 uses. The silver sword, 20 uses. Notice the degradation of utility as power increases. The iron sword, weak and light, offers 46 swings. It is reliable. It is the workhorse of the army. The steel sword, heavier and stronger, offers only 30. The silver sword, a luxury item intended for bosses or armored knights, offers a mere 20. The visual feedback for breaking a weapon in the GBA era is distinct. When the final use is consumed, the screen flashes. A distinct shattering sound effect plays, a high-pitched cling followed by a hollow, crumbling noise. A text box appears, the iron lance broke. This message is essentially an administrative notification. The item slot is now empty. If the unit is attacked on the subsequent enemy phase, they will have no means of counterattack. They will stand there, unarmed, taking damage. This necessitated a strategy known as trade chaining. If a player noticed a weapon had one use remaining, they might attack, break the weapon, and then use a second unit to use the trade command to place a fresh weapon in the first unit's hand before the turn ended. This is micromanagement at its most tedious, and therefore its most soothing. Let us discuss the Devil Axe. The Devil Axe is a unique case study in risk management. It possesses high might and decent durability, but it carries a calculation, the formula for backfire. The formula is 31 minus the user's luck stat. If the random number generator rolls below this threshold, the unit hits themselves. Why use a weapon that hurts you? Because it is durable, because it hits hard. But mostly players did not use it. It sat in the convoy, occupying one slot of storage, collecting digital dust, a wasted asset. In the sacred stones, a glitch existed. This glitch is known as the mine glitch or the enemy control glitch. While not directly a durability mechanic, it allowed players to control enemy units. By controlling enemy units, players could force enemies to trade their weapons to the player. Why is this relevant? Because enemy weapons in the GBA era often did not suffer from durability in the same way, or they possessed weapons the player was never meant to have. By acquiring a monster weapon or a dark magic tome intended only for a boss, the player could break the economy of durability entirely. But for the honest player, the countdown continued. 46, 45, 44. In 2005, Fire Emblem, Path of Radiance arrived on the GameCube. With it came the introduction of a refined forging system. Unlike Genealogy, where you repaired existing weapons, Path of Radiance allowed you to commission new ones. You could take a standard iron sword, pay gold to increase its might, decrease its weight, or increase its hit rate. You could also change its name. You could name an iron sword Sleepy Time. Critically, forging a weapon reset its durability to a maximum cap, often higher than the standard version. A standard iron sword had 46 uses. A forged iron sword could be modified, however, the cost was substantial. This game also introduced the concept of the Lagas, shapeshifters. Lagas do not use weapons in the traditional sense. They use their bodies, beaks, talons, fangs. However, they are governed by a transform gauge. This gauge is a temporal durability bar. It fills up, the unit transforms, and then it depletes by a set amount each turn or each combat engagement. When it hits 0, the unit reverts to human form and becomes vulnerable. It is cyclical durability rather than terminal durability. Its sequel, Radiant Dawn, brought back the bronze weapon tier. Bronze weapons were incapable of dealing critical hits, but they had very high durability. A bronze sword had 50 uses. 50 uses. That is a significant amount of tedious combat. Radiant Dawn also introduced the SS rank for weapons. The ultimate weapons, like the Blessed Ragnell or the Amiti, had infinite durability. Once the player acquired these items in the endgame, the durability mechanic effectively turned off for those specific characters. The anxiety evaporated. The numbers stopped counting down. For some, this was a relief. For others, it removed a layer of strategic depth. If the sword never breaks, why hesitate to swing it? We proceed to the year 2008. The platform is the Nintendo DS. The game is Fire Emblem, Shadow Dragon. This was a remake of the original NES title, bringing the series full circle. With this return to the beginning, the durability mechanics reverted to their most archaic and punishing state. In Shadow Dragon, the convenient repair shops of the Jugdral era were absent. The infinite durability of the endgame weapons in Radiant Dawn was gone. We returned to the stark reality of integer subtraction. When a wing spear broke, it was gone forever. However, Shadow Dragon introduced a new variable to the durability equation, the hammer and staff. While the hammer and staff had appeared in previous entries, its utility in Shadow Dragon was magnified by the introduction of online play and the ability to reclass units. The hammer and staff allowed a healer to restore the durability of a weapon to its maximum value, but the staff itself had only 3 uses. This created a recursive problem. Do you use one of your 3 hammer and uses to repair a Parthia bow, or do you save the hammer and staff for a moment that may never come? This is the meta-elixir problem. The tool used to fix the tool is itself a breaking tool. Furthermore, Shadow Dragon placed a heavy emphasis on the warp staff. In the original NES game, warp had infinite range and nearly unlimited utility. In the DS remake, it became a finite resource that defined the speedrunning metagame. Strategies revolved entirely around knowing exactly how many uses of warp remained. 7 uses. 6 uses. The entire tactical layer of the game collapsed into a resource management spreadsheet. In 2010, Fire Emblem, New Mystery of the Emblem arrived. It refined these systems but largely kept the status quo. It was a period of stagnation for durability mechanics. The numbers went down, the weapons broke, the cycle continued. Then came the awakening. In 2012, Fire Emblem Awakening was released on the Nintendo 3DS. This game is credited with saving the franchise from cancellation. Mechanically, it introduced a skill that fundamentally broke the laws of durability we have discussed for the last several hours. That skill is called Arms Thrift. Arms Thrift is a skill learned by the mercenary class. Its function is simple. When the unit attacks, the game runs a probability calculation. The formula is the unit's luck stat multiplied by 2. If the random number generator rolls below this percentage, the weapon does not lose durability. Consider a unit with 50 luck. 50 times 2 is 100. This results in a 100% activation rate. For the first time in the series' history, a standard unit, not a lord with a divine blade, but a regular mercenary, could achieve infinite durability on any weapon. A player could equip a legendary weapon like the axe Hellswat and swing it thousands of times without the counter ever moving from 25 to 24. This effectively removed the concept of entropy from the game for optimized characters. The stress of resource management evaporated, replaced by the satisfaction of a static integer. However, for units without this skill, the degradation continued as usual. Awakening also introduced glass weapons, glass swords, glass lances, glass axes. These items possessed incredibly high attack power, rivaling the strongest silver weaponry. However, they possessed exactly 3 uses. 3. 1, 2, 3, shatter. The existence of glass weapons is a joke by the developers. They are a caricature of the durability system. They force the player to confront the fleeting nature of power. Most players simply sold them for gold, converting the potential for violence into liquid currency. 3 years later, in 2015, Intelligent Systems released Fire Emblem Fates. Fates represents the most radical shift in weapon durability in the franchise's 25-year history. In Fire Emblem Fates, the developers looked at the durability counter and they deleted it. Iron swords, infinite use. Steel lances, infinite use. Silver axes, infinite use. The counter was gone. A player could buy a single iron katana in Chapter 7 and use that exact same katana in Chapter 28. It would never chip, it would never dull, it was eternal. However, to prevent the player from simply using the strongest weapons exclusively, the developers introduced a system of stat penalties and debuffs. This is a complex trade-off. In previous games, a silver sword was balanced by its low durability and high cost. In Fates, since durability was infinite, the silver sword was balanced by a debuff. After using a silver sword, the user would suffer a penalty, strength -2 and skill -2. This debuff stacked. If the unit attacked again on the next turn, the penalty became strength -4, then -6. Eventually, the wielder of the silver sword would become so weak that they could not lift their arms. The weapon remained sharp, but the warrior became dull. The player then had to wait. The debuff recovered at a rate of 1 point per turn. This mechanic shifted the boredom from inventory management to stat recovery management. Instead of visiting a shop to buy a new sword, the player simply had to end their turn and wait for the numbers to go back up. It was a different flavor of tedium. It is worth noting that staves in Fire Emblem Fates retained their durability. A healing staff still broke after 20 uses. The developers seemingly decided that infinite healing was a bridge too far, even in a world of unbreakable steel. In 2017, we received Fire Emblem Echoes, Shadows of Valentia. As this was a remake of Gaiden, which we discussed in Chapter 1, it faithfully recreated the no-durability system of 1992. Weapons were singular items held by units. The Gold Knight holds the Gradavis. He holds it forever. However, Echoes modernized the combat art system. Instead of weapon durability, special attacks cost hit points. To use the skill Double Lion, the unit sacrificed 10 HP. This transforms the economy of the game. The resource being spent is not the steel of the blade, but the blood of the wielder. Since HP can be restored by a healer, this is a renewable resource. It creates a loop. The unit hurts themselves to attack, the healer fixes the unit, the healer gains experience points for healing. The cycle is sustainable. Entropy is defeated by biology. Finally, we arrive at the Nintendo Switch era. Fire Emblem, Three Houses, released in 2019. Three Houses attempted to synthesize every system that came before it into one unified theory of weapon degradation. Durability returned. The numbers were back. An iron sword had 40 uses. A steel sword had 50. However, the combat art system from Echoes was integrated into the durability system. In Three Houses, a unit can perform a standard attack which consumes 1 durability. Or they can perform a combat art like Wrath Strike, which consumes 3 durability to deal extra damage. Some high-level arts like Swift Strikes consume 4 or 5 durability per use. The legendary Sublime Heaven attack consumes durability rapidly. This changed the perception of the durability number. It was no longer a countdown of hits left. It was a mana pool. A sword with 40 durability was not 40 attacks, it was 40 points of energy. You could spend it slowly, 1 point at a time, or you could burn it all in 4 massive turns of 10 points each. When a weapon reached 0 in 3 houses, it did not disappear. It remained in the inventory as a broken weapon, similar to the Genealogy system. It could be repaired at the blacksmith. But repair in 3 houses required materials: smithing stones, black sand steel, woot steel, mithril. The player had to forage for these materials. You had to break the armor of giant monsters to obtain woot steel to repair your brave lance. This added a layer of hunting and gathering to the logistics of war. You were not just a general, you were a supply chain manager. The protagonist's weapon, the sword of the creator, had a unique mechanic. It could not be repaired with standard steel. Instead, it recharged when the protagonist chose the rest option on the weekend calendar. By choosing to sleep, the sword repaired itself by 5 uses. This is a literal interpretation of the video we are creating right now. The act of resting, of doing nothing, restores the potential for action. Sleep is the mechanic that fights entropy. We have now covered the main timeline up to the year 2019. We have seen the numbers go from 40 to infinite to 3 to infinite again and back to a monopool of 40. The final era, the current era, is Fire Emblem Engage. Released in 2023, Engage returned to the Fate system. Standard weapons do not break. An iron sword is eternal. A silver greatlance is eternal. However, the game introduced Engage weapons. These are spectral weapons summoned from the spirits of past heroes, Marth, Sigurd, Celica. These weapons are effectively infinite, but they are limited by a turn timer. You can only wield them for 3 turns before the connection is severed, and you must recharge a meter to use them again. This is the ultimate abstraction of durability. The weapon does not break. The time in which you are allowed to hold it breaks. It is temporal durability. The sword exists, but you cannot touch it until you have earned the right to do so again. Why does this matter? Why have we spent thousands of words discussing the difference between a sword that vanishes and a sword that becomes dull? It matters because it dictates the pace of our breathing. When a weapon has 50 uses, we breathe easily. We are liberal with our strikes, we are confident. When a weapon has 5 uses, our breath shallows, we hesitate, we check the math. We check the enemy's defense, we check the shop inventory. The mechanics of durability are the mechanics of anxiety. By removing them, the developers remove the anxiety, but they also remove the texture of the experience. A world where nothing breaks is a world without consequence. A world where everything breaks is a world of constant maintenance. We float somewhere in between. Let us now delve into the specific mathematical formulas used to calculate weapon wear in the spin-off titles, specifically the Fire Emblem Warriors sub-series, where a single sword can kill 1,000 enemies in a single map without receiving a scratch. In the Warriors games, the genre shifts from strategy to Musu action. Here, the concept of durability is logically incompatible with the gameplay loop. If you must defeat 2,000 soldiers to clear a level, and your sword breaks after 40 hits, the game is unplayable. Thus, Warriors adopts the weapon attribute system. Weapons have slots, slots have skills. Rainstorm, Strong V, Anti-Trauma. The weapon is a vessel for data, not a physical object. It is a microchip shaped like a lance. But let us return to the mainline series. There is a specific sound effect I want you to imagine. It is the sound of the armory menu opening in the Game Boy Advance games. Ding! The menu expands, the list appears. Iron sword, 460 gold. Iron lance, 360 gold. Hand axe, 300 gold. The hand axe, a ranged axe, 1-2 range. In many games, this is the most efficient weapon. It is cheap, it is throwable, it is durable. Players often fill their entire convoy with hand axes. This is known as hand axe emblem. Why use a legendary blade when a mass-produced hatchet gets the job done? This is the industrialization of fantasy warfare. The durability system encourages this commoditization. If the regalia break, we use the cheap stuff. We become efficient. We become boring. And being boring is safe. Being boring is consistent. Consider the vulnerary. The vulnerary is the basic healing item. It has 3 uses. It restores 10 HP. In every game, the vulnerary has 3 uses. It is one of the few constants. While swords change, while magic fluctuates, the vulnerary remains a trinity of healing. Sip, 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 gone. It is a comforting rhythm. In the next section, we will begin a statistical comparison of the cost per swing of the silver lance across all 17 entries in the franchise, adjusted for in-game inflation and gold availability. This requires a deep dive into the funds ranking system of Fire Emblem 7. The funds rank rewards the player for hoarding gold and assets. Using an expensive weapon lowers your funds rank. Therefore, to achieve the highest rank, the S rank, you are actively punished for using your best tools. You must win the war using only the dullest, cheapest iron. You must save the world without spending a dime. This is the ultimate expression of the durability philosophy. The weapon is most valuable when it is never used at all. The perfect sword is the one that stays in the sheath, its durability counter remaining at 40/40 forever. Perfect, pristine, unused. Asleep. We will now begin the statistical breakdown of the cost efficiency of violence. To understand the true value of weapon durability, one must calculate the gold per use ratio. We will utilize data from Fire Emblem, the Blazing Blade, released on the Game Boy Advance in 2003, as our primary data set for this economic analysis. This game features a standard currency system and fixed shop prices. Let us begin with the Iron Sword. The purchase price of an iron sword is 460 gold. The maximum durability of an iron sword is 46 uses. By dividing 460 by 46, we arrive at a quotient of 10. Therefore, the cost of swinging an iron sword is exactly 10 gold coins per swing. Now let us examine the silver sword. The purchase price of a silver sword is 1,500 gold. The maximum durability of a silver sword is 20 uses. By dividing 1,500 by 20, we arrive at a quotient of 75. Therefore, the cost of swinging a silver sword is 75 gold coins per swing. This reveals a staggering economic disparity. A single strike with a silver sword costs 7.5 times as much as a strike with an iron sword. When a player chooses to use a silver sword to defeat a weak enemy, such as a brigand with low health points, they are engaging in a gross misappropriation of military funds. This data point becomes critical when analyzing the funds ranking system found in the battle history menu. The tactician is graded on a scale from 1 star to 5 stars based on the total net worth of the army at the end of the campaign. Net worth is calculated as liquid gold plus the current resale value of all items in the convoy. Every time a unit swings a silver sword, the net worth of the army decreases by 75 gold. Every time a unit swings an iron sword, the net worth decreases by 10 gold. To achieve the maximum S rank in funds, the optimal strategy is to never use high-tier weapons. The player is factually encouraged to hoard the wolf bale, the mani-katti, and the rapier, and instead force their lords to fight exclusively with mass-produced iron. This is the gameplay loop of a miser. Let us shift our factual focus to the mechanics of magic tomes. Durability functions differently for mages due to the weight of the books. In the Game Boy Advance era, the Flux Tome is the basic dark magic implement. It has 45 uses. It weighs 8 units. The Nosferatu Tome, which drains health from the enemy, has 30 uses. It weighs 12 units. The durability of dark magic is consistently lower than that of anima magic. The Fire Tome has 40 uses. The Thunder Tome has 35 uses. The Elfire Tome has 30 uses. The Bolting Tome, a long-range siege spell, has 5 uses. The Bolting Tome provides a specific factual anomaly. It allows a mage to attack from a distance of 3 to 10 tiles. Because it only has 5 uses, the player often hesitates to use it. However, enemy units equipped with Bolting Tomes do not hesitate. In many Fire Emblem games, if an enemy with a siege tome is not provoked, they will simply stand still. If the player moves into range, the enemy uses 1 charge. A common strategy for experience grinding involves baiting the enemy. The player places a unit with high resistance on the very edge of the bolting range. The enemy attacks, they miss or deal 0 damage. The tome durability drops from 5 to 4. The player waits 4 to 3, 3 to 2, 2 to 1, 1 to 0. Once the tome breaks, the enemy mage is defenseless. They cannot counterattack. The player can then surround the helpless mage and attack them repeatedly with weak weapons to gain experience points without killing them. This is known as boss abuse or unit torture. It is a strategy entirely dependent on the integer limit of weapon durability. We must also document the existence of the Laga's Lance in Fire Emblem, Path of Radiance. The Laga's Lance is a weapon designed specifically to deal effective damage against Beast Tribe units. It has a durability of 25. This is unusually low for a lance. A steel lance has 40 uses. The developers balanced the high damage multiplier of the Laga's Lance by reducing its lifespan by 37.5% compared to a standard steel lance. Let us look at the Sieglind and Siegmund, the sacred twin weapons of Renais in Fire Emblem, the Sacred Stones. These weapons are obtained in Chapter 16. They have 30 uses each. They deal effective damage against monster units. Unlike the falchion from the first game, they are not infinite. They can break. If the player uses Siegmund to kill 30 standard zombies in the Phantom ship map, the legendary spear will shatter. This renders the protagonist, Ephraim, unable to use his signature weapon against the final boss, the Demon King. There is no repair shop in the Sacred Stones. However, there is a glitch. If the player uses a Gorgon Egg monster and utilizes the Control Enemy glitch, they can access the inventory of enemy units. By trading a broken player weapon to an enemy and then killing that enemy, the weapon can sometimes be manipulated or refreshed. But legally, within the game's intended code, the Siegmund is a finite resource. Let us discuss the Armor Slayer. The Armor Slayer is a sword. It has 18 might against armored units. It has 18 uses in Fire Emblem, Thracia 776. Thracia 776 is notorious for its low durability caps. In Thracia 776, a steel sword has 60 uses, which is high. But a light brand has 60 uses, but functions as magic at range. However, in Thracia 776, if you are captured by the enemy, they take your inventory. If you capture an enemy, you take their inventory. This introduces the concept of parasitic durability. In Thracia 776, you do not buy weapons. The shops are expensive and rare. Instead, you rely on the capture command. You lower an enemy's HP, you capture them. You strip them of their iron lance. That iron lance has 23 uses left. You use it until it breaks. Then you capture another enemy. Your supply chain is entirely dependent on the durability remaining on the weapons of your opponents. You are recycling the tools of your oppression. Let us list the durability of the legendary weapons in Fire Emblem, the Binding Blade. The Durandal, 20 uses. The Armads, 20 uses. The Aureola, 20 uses. The Forblaze, 20 uses. The Maltet, 20 uses. The Mulegear, 20 uses. The Apocalypse, 20 uses. The Ekasach, 20 uses. This uniformity is stark, 20 uses. The final chapter of the Binding Blade requires the player to use these specific weapons to unlock the true ending. If the player breaks the Durandal in Chapter 14, they cannot access the Idun battle. The game forces the player to preserve these items for 20 chapters. They sit in the inventory. They are beautiful icons. They are useless stat sticks until the final hour. Let us discuss the Venin weapons. Venin Edge, Venin Lance, Venin Axe. These weapons inflict the poison status condition. They appear in Fire Emblem, the Blazing Blade. They have extremely low hit rates. The Venin Lance has 40 uses. Most players never use them. They are sold immediately. The value of a Venin Lance is 400 gold. It is worth more as currency than as a weapon. Let us examine the Ballista. The Ballista is a long-range bow that can only be used by the Archer class while occupying a specific tile on the map. In the Game Boy Advance games, the Ballista is a distinct object on the map with its own durability. A standard ballista has 5 uses. An iron ballista has 5 uses. A killer ballista has 5 uses. The unit Will or Rebecca sits in the chair. They fire 5 shots. Once the shots are depleted, the ballista remains on the map as a piece of furniture. It cannot be reloaded. It creates a terrain obstacle. It provides defense bonuses, but it ceases to be a weapon. It becomes a chair. In Fire Emblem, 3 Houses, the Fail-Not Bow, it is the relic of Claude. It has 20 uses. The combat art Fallen Star consumes 5 uses. This allows for exactly 4 uses of Fallen Star before the bow breaks, 4 actions. The mathematical precision of this limitation dictates the tempo of the engagement. Let us look at the Dragon Stone. The Dragon Stone allows a Manakete to transform. In Shadow Dragon, the Dragon Stone has roughly 30 uses depending on the type. Mage Stone, Fire Stone, Divine Stone. When the stone breaks, the Manakete cannot transform. They become a defenseless unit with standard human movement and 0 combat ability. However, in Fire Emblem, the Sacred Stones, the character Myr has a Dragon Stone with 50 uses. She cannot obtain another one. There is only 1 Dragon Stone in the entire game code available to her, 50 attacks. Once Myr attacks 50 times, she is permanently retired from combat. She becomes a spectator. There is a glitch to repair it using the Gorgon Egg control method, but without glitches, her utility is strictly finite. This creates a psychological pressure known as too good to use. Myr is invincible, but using her feels like wasting a diamond to cut glass. Let us discuss the Light Rune. The Light Rune is an item in the Blazing Blade. It is not a weapon. It is a consumable. It creates a barrier on a tile that units cannot pass. It acts as a wall. It has durability in the sense that it lasts for a specific number of turns, usually until the end of the chapter or until an enemy waits on it. It does not break in the inventory. It breaks reality. Finally, let us list the repair costs for the Tiefing in Fire Emblem, Genealogy of the Holy War. The Tiefing is a holy sword. It grants plus 20 skill, plus 20 speed, plus 10 resistance. It has 50 uses. To repair 1 use of the Tiefing costs 1,000 gold. To repair the sword from broken 0 to full 50 costs 50,000 gold. The maximum amount of gold a unit can hold is 50,000 gold. Therefore, to fully repair the Tiefing, the unit Sigurd must completely empty his bank account. He must be at the absolute cap of wealth to restore his blade to full condition. This is a 1-to-1 ratio of total economic power to total military power. This concludes the statistical overview of the cost per use and specific item anomalies. We will continue with the analysis of durability in the context of support grinding in the next segment. We now direct our attention to the intersection of interpersonal relationships and inventory degradation. This is the analysis of support grinding. In the Game Boy Advance era, specifically Fire Emblem, the Binding Blade, the Blazing Blade, and the Sacred Stones, support points between characters are accrued by ending the turn while the units are standing on adjacent tiles. This process is passive. It does not require combat. It does not require healing. It strictly requires proximity and the passage of time. Therefore, in the GBA era, it is possible for two units to fall in love without ever unsheathing their weapons. The cost of an A-rank support in this system is measured in turn count, not weapon durability. However, this changes the tactical ranking calculation. If the player spends 100 turns standing still to build a support between Florina and Lyn, the tactics rank at the end of the game will suffer. The game punishes the player for wasting time, but rewards the player with stat boosts. It is a trade-off between efficiency and romance. In later entries such as Fire Emblem, Awakening, and Fire Emblem Fates, support points are generated through active participation. Units build rapport by fighting side by side in the dual strike or pair-up stances. This introduces a durability cost to affection. To build a support, units must attack. To attack, units must consume durability. Let us calculate the cost of love in Fire Emblem Awakening. For two units to reach S-rank support, they must accumulate a specific number of support points. Let us approximate this as 20 map engagements. If each engagement requires an average of 2 attacks to defeat an enemy, that is 40 swings of a weapon. An iron sword has 40 uses. Therefore, in a literal sense, the price of a marriage in Fire Emblem Awakening is exactly 1 iron sword. The weapon is the dowry paid to the god of war. We will now examine the phenomenon of staff spamming and its relation to weapon rank. Weapon rank is the letter grade, E, D, C, B, A, S, that determines which weapons a unit can wield. To increase this rank, the unit must use weapons of that type. Each swing grants weapon experience, or WEXP. An iron sword grants 1 point of WEXP. A steel sword grants 1 point of WEXP. A silver sword grants 2 points of WEXP. This creates a linear grind. To go from rank E to rank A requires hundreds of swings. However, staves function differently. A heal staff grants roughly 10 experience points toward the user's level and 2 points toward staff rank, but high-level staves grant significantly more. The barrier staff is a utility item that increases a unit's resistance stat for a few turns. The torch staff is a utility item that lights up a foggy map. Crucially, these staves can be used even if they are not needed. You can use a torch staff on a map with no fog. You can use a barrier staff on a unit that is not in danger of magic attacks. This leads to the strategy of barrier spamming. The barrier staff has 15 uses. It grants generous weapon experience. A player can buy a barrier staff, move their cleric, cast barrier on a random knight, and end turn. Repeat this 15 times. The staff breaks. The cleric gains levels. The cleric gains staff mastery. Nothing of value was accomplished on the battlefield. The barrier dissipated. The durability was converted purely into data. This is the most efficient way to train a healer. It is the conversion of gold to buy the staff into experience, skipping the combat phase entirely. Let us discuss the broken weapon training method found in Fire Emblem, 3 houses. In 3 houses, when a weapon breaks, it does not disappear. It remains equipped. The unit can still attack with it, but the might is reduced, the hit rate is reduced, and the enemy is likely to double attack. However, swinging a broken weapon still grants class mastery points. Class mastery is required to unlock skills like Death Blow or Fiendish Blow. A player who wishes to optimize their army will intentionally break a weapon. They will equip the broken sword. They will find an enemy priest standing on a heal tile, a tile that regenerates HP every turn. The player will surround the priest so it cannot move. The player will attack the priest with the broken sword. The damage dealt is minimal, perhaps 1 or 2 points. The priest regenerates the health on the enemy phase. The player attacks again. This creates a perpetual motion machine of violence. The weapon is already broken, so it cannot degrade further. The enemy heals, so they do not die. The player attacks for 99 turns. The character masters the class. This strategy relies on the fact that durability has a floor. Once you hit 0, you cannot go negative. The integer hits a hard stop, and in that 0 state, infinite training becomes possible. We must now address weapon weight and its parasitic relationship with durability. In the Game Boy Advance games, every weapon has a weight stat. Every unit has a constitution, con stat. If the weight exceeds the constitution, the unit suffers a penalty to speed. Attack speed equals speed minus weight minus constitution. If a unit's attack speed is 4 points higher than the enemy, the unit attacks twice. Doubling is generally good. It kills the enemy faster. However, doubling consumes 2 uses of durability per round of combat. Consider a Pegasus Knight. They have low constitution. If they equip a heavy steel lance, their speed drops. They no longer double the enemy. They attack once. They deal damage. They take damage. The combat ends. Durability consumed 1. If they equip a light slim lance, their speed remains high. They double the enemy. They attack twice. Durability consumed 2. Paradoxically, equipping a worse, heavier weapon can preserve your weapon supply by preventing your own unit from being efficient. You are slowing them down to save money. However, if you fail to kill the enemy because you only attacked once, the enemy survives. The enemy attacks you on their turn. You counterattack. Durability consumed 2. 1 on player phase, 1 on enemy phase. The result is the same durability loss, but you took more damage. This calculation, efficiency versus safety versus resource conservation, is the triangle of anxiety that defines the mid-game of Fire Emblem, the Blazing Blade. Let us look at the Laga's transformation gauge in Fire Emblem, Radiant Dawn again. We mentioned it briefly, but let us look at the olivey grass item. Lagas lose transformation points every turn. To stay in beast form, they must consume items. Olivey grass restores the gauge. Olivey grass has uses, durability. A Laga's warrior is not limited by their claws breaking, but by their supply of grass running out. It is a hunger mechanic disguised as weapon durability. If Volug runs out of grass, he reverts to a human. He punches for 0 damage. He is essentially unarmed. The logistics of a beast army are the logistics of agriculture. Let us examine the unlock staff. The unlock staff opens doors and chests from a distance. It usually has 10 uses. A door key has 1 use. A chest key has 1 use. A thief with a lockpick has varying uses depending on the game, infinite in some, finite in others. In Fire Emblem, Thracia 776, the thief's lockpick has infinite uses, but it can be stolen. In Fire Emblem, the Blazing Blade, the lockpick has 15 uses. Each door costs 1 use. Each chest costs 1 use. If Matthew the thief opens a door, he consumes a charge. If the player forgets to check the durability of the lockpick, they may find themselves standing in front of the final treasure chest with a value of 0. The lockpick breaks. The chest remains closed. The talisman inside, which grants +2 resistance, is lost to history. The frustration is palpable. The player must restart the chapter. Let us discuss the siege engines in Fire Emblem, Fates, Fire Orbs, Ballisti. These are map structures. In Fates, they can be used by units with the Mechanist or Archer skills. They have infinite durability, but they have a cooldown. After firing, the turret must cool down for a turn. This replaces the integer limit 5 uses with a temporal limit 1 shot per 2 turns. It changes the rhythm. Instead of resource management, it becomes time management. We must also mention the forging economy in Fire Emblem, Shadow Dragon DS. In this game, you can forge a weapon to increase its stats. You can also rename it. But interestingly, you can forge a weapon to reduce its stats. Why would you do this? To lower the weight, or to manipulate the RNG in specific TAS, tool-assisted speedrun scenarios where dealing less damage prevents a specific enemy behavior. But regardless of the stats, the durability remains the same unless specifically forged. The cost to forge an effective weapon often exceeds the cost of buying 10 replacement weapons. Forging is a luxury tax. It is for the 1%. The durability system is for the working class. Let us analyze the effectiveness calculation and how it saves durability. A horse slayer deals triple damage or double, depending on the game, to cavalry, if an enemy cavalier has 30 HP. An iron lance deals 10 damage. It takes 3 hits to kill, 3 durability. A horse slayer deals 30 damage, 10 base x3 effective bonus. It takes 1 hit to kill, 1 durability. Using specialized tools is environmentally friendly. It conserves steel. The wing spear in Shadow Dragon is the ultimate example of this. It is effective against armor and cavalry. These two enemy types make up 70% of the enemies in the game. Therefore, Kita, the wielder of the wing spear, is the most efficient recycling plant in the army. She converts 1 durability point into 1 death with alarming consistency. Because the wing spear is a personal weapon, it can be repaired with the hammer and staff. This loop wing spear, kill, 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 hammer and repeat, is the central highway of the Shadow Dragon experience. Finally, let us list the durability of the rusty weapons in Fire Emblem. Echoes, rusty sword, rusty lance, rusty bow. These items are found in dungeons. They are terrible, high weight, low might, but they do not break because weapons in Echoes do not break. However, they can be forged at the smithy. A rusty sword can be forged into a steel sword or a silver sword or the legendary Mercurius. The rust is a chrysalis. The weapon is not degrading, it is waiting to be born. This is the inverse of the standard Fire Emblem entropy. In most games, a silver sword degrades into a broken scrap. In Echoes, a rusty scrap upgrades into a silver sword. It is an optimistic view of metallurgy. In the next section, we will engage in a monotonous reading of the shop inventory lists for chapters 1 through 10 of Fire Emblem. The sacred stones, citing the price and durability of every item available for purchase.